afternoon to each and every one of you. We are so glad. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. We are so glad to come into your homes. Just wanted to take a moment to introduce you all. This is the Deborah's Voice Show, and I'm here as your host, Dr. DeJuan Jackson, to be able to empower and impart into you just some tools and truths that will bless your life. And so, as I shared with you all a few weeks ago, that we have this segment where we're able to share with you all on multiple topics, all right, on multiple topics. And so we're just going to be sharing today. We're talking about relationships, and I think this is going to bless you. I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about relationships, because I think that out there, everybody is looking for a relationship, right? Everybody is looking for, some type of love. We want to feel connected. We want to feel like somebody's there for us. We want to feel like we have people in our lives of value, right? So I think the most important thing when we talk about relationships, that we understand that relationships are a significant part of our lives, right? Because I'm a pastor as well, the Bible talks about, how can two walk together unless they agree. It also talks about in Proverbs how if two are together, then the one can warm the one who is cold, right? So when two people are working together in a relationship, how do you know it can be a wonderful and a beautiful thing? I recently wrote a book, and my book is called The Misconception of Love and Relationships, and I'll just show you, this is my book that I recently wrote, and you can definitely contact us via DeJuanJackson.com on my website and order this book, or you can also call into our local office at 251-301-7609, or you can also inbox us on Facebook through our Women of Virtue page or DeJuan Jackson page, and we'd be happy to get a copy to you. They are just $15, and it's going to bless your life. All right, so when we're talking about relationships, I want you to think about this, because love in its proper balance is the most beautiful thing, right? Love in its proper balance is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. As I share in my book, over almost 40 years, my parents were married before my mom passed away, and my parents had such a wonderful relationship. They were example to me and to many other people in life. They were able to communicate. They knew how to balance things in life. They knew how to enjoy life. They knew how to share, right? So when we think about love, we want to talk about a husband and a wife, amen. Or if you're dating and you're getting ready to enter into marriage, I want to just give you some tips that I think that will be effective for you during this particular time, right? One of the number one things in relationship that is needed is honesty, all right? It's very, very important. If you have a relationship and you're going to cause that relationship to endure for a period of time or for longevity, one of the greatest things you can do is be honest with the person. Even if it's going to hurt them, you want to tell the truth. Why? Because when you tell the truth, it lets the person see that you are genuine. It lets the person see that you are willing and open to share. Even if it's going to hurt them at the moment, they will be able to trust you and know that you're able to bond and to grow in your relationship. So honesty is very important. So when we think about being honest and we think about being open, right? You want to share your heart. You want to be able to become vulnerable with that person. So if I'm going to be honest, I'm also going to have to learn to be vulnerable. And so if I don't understand that God really wants us to be vulnerable, that we as a person have to be vulnerable to somebody. So in your relationship, if it's in your marriage or in a close friendship or even a dating relationship, one of the things that you're going to have to do is learn to be vulnerable. And a lot of times we don't like being vulnerable because it causes us to have to trust that a person will not expose what you're sharing, that a person will be able to be trustworthy in what you're sharing and relating into them with. But I want you to understand that if you are being honest and you're being vulnerable, the relationship can really grow and it can really go into places that you never thought possible. Many times when people are in relationships, they don't realize that if they're not willing to share and become naked, right? I have to go back to the Bible, being a pastor, right? The Bible says that Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed, which means that they were able to share their flaws. They were able to share their insecurities, right? They were able to share all of the things about them. And so today, we know, of course, we're not walking around naked. We're not walking around without our clothes, but there should be a person that you're able to just bear all, a person that's not going to be judgmental, a person that's not going to prejudge you or begin to talk negative when you begin to share, your heart, when you begin to share your disappointments, when you begin to share the spaces and places in your life that maybe you feel as though, this is where I failed. This is where, I don't feel like I have victory. This is places where I feel like I'm not advancing. And so all of those things will cause you to be able to open up yourself. The more that person is willing, the more that person is open. So I told you how important it is to be honest. I told you how important it is to be vulnerable, but let me tell you how important it is to make sure that if you're going to be vulnerable, you got to be vulnerable with a person who is trustworthy, right? You want to be vulnerable with a person who is trustworthy. So if I'm going to be vulnerable, I have to make sure that the person that I'm going to be vulnerable with in my relationship is a person that's not going to go back out and start talking about everything that you shared. Because when you find a person that is not able to hold what you share, how many know that it's going to be hard to be vulnerable? It's going to be hard to share. It's going to be hard to expose your heart. It's going to be hard to tell, them why. You don't want to put yourself in the positioning, or you don't want to be able to be vulnerable to a person that you feel that you cannot trust. So that's why it's important that you have to have trust, right? You have to be able to be willing to know that this person is going to hold in confidence the things that you share. And so when you're building a love relationship, these are key targets that are needed. You have to be willing to have that love. You have to be willing to have that honesty. You have to be willing to have that trust. You have to be willing to be vulnerable, right? And then you have to be able to communicate. So if I'm not a communicator, how about that? If I'm not a communicator, then you have to learn how to speak little by little, right? You're going to have to learn how to open up. Maybe you grew up in a house where you weren't talked to a lot, or you didn't have a lot of communication with your parents. Maybe you didn't have, that open avenue, but you're going to have to learn. Why? Because in a relationship where there is a breakdown of communication, there will be a breakdown in relationship. So if you don't know how to talk to your spouse, or you feel like you can't get to your spouse, or you feel like you can't speak to the one that you're dating, or the one that you're trying to connect with as in a relationship that will pursue and go to a place of marriage, right? Then you want to understand that I have to learn how to get them to communicate. And so in learning how to get people to communicate, one of the greatest things I've learned is to be patient and learn how to be a listener, right? So if I'm hearing a particular person start to share their heart or share something, then I have to learn how to listen. I have to listen effectively to exactly what it is that person is trying to share with me, and not interrupt. Because a lot of times I will try to interrupt the person, or I want to stop them from what they're saying, but you be attentive and you be silent. One of the wonderful lessons that I've learned is that you can go in and say, listen, I want to have a conversation with you, and I'm asking you, please don't interrupt me until the end. Because what happens a lot of times when communication is happening in relationships, once you start interrupting the person, then it's harder for that person to get everything out. So it's so important for you to wait until that person has shared as much as they possibly feel like they can share at that appointed time. And then even if you need to have a notebook or have your phone or something there that you can jot notes, or you can take something down and then begin to reply or respond to that person, so that way you're able to respond effectively, right? And so even in communication, how many know every time that person may share with you or open up their heart or begin to unlock or begin to communicate, how many know that it's not always needing a response? Okay, I'm going to say that again. You're not always needing a response, meaning that you don't immediately have to give them a response because they have told you something about them, good, bad, indifferent. You can just listen to what they have to say and then maybe say, you know what, let me think about it, let me pray about it, let me wait on it, and then respond. So it's not always that you have to immediately give a person a response as soon as they share something with you. And so for some of you, this may be hard because you may want an immediate response. You may want that spouse or that person to be able to tell you back immediately in that relationship what it is that they're thinking, what it is that they're feeling. But when you learn different types of personalities and you understand that everybody can't think on the spot, right? Some people, it takes them a moment and it takes them time to process what you have said. Let them ponder on it, let them think on it, and then come back and be able to respond. So it's very important. I want to talk about in communication and relationships, then you have to learn how to set times up, right? I talked about being vulnerable. So if I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to have that true love relationship, then I have to understand that I need to literally set times, right? So I'm going to literally take times to set up and say, you know what, on Thursday at 4 o'clock, this is our time for communication and the things that may be upon your heart that you need to share, because you got to remember today, people have so many schedules. Some couples work opposite shifts. Some couples have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, 2 kids, whatever. The dogs, the family members, your in-laws, all of those things are going on. So you have to literally schedule time to be able to have an effective conversation without interruption, right? Because how many know that if you start a conversation and it's not planned, it's not scheduled, it's not put on the calendar, it's not, set aside to say this is our time, how many know it could be easily interrupted? And so I want to really recommend unto couples to really make sure that you take time to schedule in. For those of you that may be entrepreneurs, those of you that may work for yourself like I do, it's very important that you have to literally put it in the calendar to schedule time to say, okay, this is my date night. This is my time of communication. This is my time to schedule intimacy. All of these different things, you need to try to begin to schedule them. Why? Because your schedule is full. You're constantly going. You have things on your agenda. So you need to make sure that you're still being effective in communication with your spouse. And so put those times in there, put those spaces in there, and then don't allow them to be altered. I know a lot of times people will put it down, but then when something comes up, then you switch that. So it's very important that you understand with communication, and when you're communicating with your spouse and you're working with your love relationship, then you're going to have to be able to make an investment in it, and you're going to have to be able to have endurance with it, but you're also going to have to be able to schedule certain things. So you schedule it, you put it in place, you put it in operation, and you make sure that it's going to cause, it's going to be, effective, put it that way. So even let me tell you how important this is, because a lot of times we feel like it's just whenever I feel, let me just start talking about it. But it's so important that even if you have things on your heart that you want to communicate with your spouse, write those things down, jot it down. If you're not a writer, get a dictaphone on your phone and just make a note and say it in your phone. You know what? I need to talk to my spouse about this. I need to talk to my spouse about that. And then guess what happens? Then you go back and revisit that. So when you come together, you have specific things that you're able to speak to them about, and you have specific things that you want to communicate about that's going to cause you to be able to. Important and that you understand when it comes to communicating in relationships that this is something that cannot be avoided, right? So you're going to have to learn how to communicate effectively. You're going to have to learn how to be able to speak effectively to your spouse and setting up the proper settings. The worst thing that can happen is for a person, you're out to dinner with a crowd of people, or you're around friends, and then your spouse wants to talk about something that you may feel is personal, or feel that you don't want to expose or don't want to talk about in front of other people. And so that's the worst feeling. And so it's very important that you learn your spouse, learn about them, understand, study their ways, study their patterns, study, them, so that you can understand how to effectively communicate, and then to know when to communicate. Like I said, for some of you, you're going to have to literally schedule those times, or some people just wait until they go to bed, and it's another form of pillow talk. So they'll be in the bed and then start to discuss different things. But even if that's the way that you want to communicate, you need to make sure that that's a time that's going to be acceptable for your spouse, so that your spouse may be tired and worn out at the time that you're ready to share. But if you communicate that to your spouse and say, you know what, when we go to bed, I'd like to share something with you this evening or on this particular day, it helps your spouse to be aware of that and even more alert. Because if you're tired and you've had a long day, how many know you may not want to be talking at a time? You may be exhausted and you're just ready to go to sleep. If you have, young children or whatever, when you hit the bedroom, sometimes you don't feel like you're wanting to communicate or talk about different issues. You may really just be that tired that you want to fall out. And so especially for women who have multiple things that are going on, multiple assignments that are happening throughout the day. You may be a wife, you're a mother, you're a worker at some type of business, or you're a CEO or entrepreneur. So you have so many different hats that you're playing. Then you may be a daughter-in-law, you may be a mother-in-law, you may be so many different avenues that you are having to work out, right? Then you may be the caretaker for your parent. So there's so many avenues that you have to deal with, and you have to make sure that you can put a balance to each and every one of those so that the fulfillment of what needs to happen can come to pass. So I pray that this is encouraging you on today, because love is a beautiful thing, but it has to be done in the proper portion and in the right mindset, and the right patterns have to be established and set up. Being married for over 32 years and understanding I had to go through the process of trial and error, I want to be able to help you on this show, even through, like I said, through my book. I want to be able to introduce these topics to you that will help you to really survive and be able to grow. More and more, we're seeing, the divorce rate is high. People are not staying together like they used to. Why? Because a lot of times people don't know how to implement things at the beginning. And so as soon as they have those hard and those rough seasons, they begin to immediately back down, or they begin to throw in the towel completely on the relationship. So I want to take a minute to recommend my book to you. If you see this book, I want you, amen, to order. It's called The Misconception of Love and Relationships. It's a beautiful book that's going to bless you, bless your life, bless your family, your husband, your wife, either one. It's not written for women only. It's written, amen, to be able to bless couples as a whole. Why? Because there's so many misconceptions in relationships, and I believe communication is one of them. Learning how to effectively communicate will always transition your life. Learning how to effectively communicate will always transition your life. Hear me. You will grow and grow and grow. The easier it is for you all to communicate and get on the same page and to transition how you're thinking or how you have thought. Sometimes people say, oh, that's for the birds. I'm just going to tell them when I feel like it. I'm going to say when I feel like it, but that may not work. And let me tell you something. Even if you're not an effective communicator verbally, then communicate through writing letters. Communicate through your social media not your social media, but your phone. Learn how to communicate. I love to write, so I'm a writer as well. So sometimes throughout the times, I would sit down and just write a 3 or 4 page letter to release my emotions and feelings and give that letter to that spouse. And I think that that's so important, because sometimes you may not have the words to articulate and sit down in front of that person, but you can still get the communication out by writing, being effective. And so if your spouse is a writer and they may not be a talker as much, don't shut them down to say, no, you have to say it. Sometimes it's good. Allow them to take that moment to write each and every thing that they may be feeling, and to give it to you and give you time to read over it. And then you're able to come back to that thing and begin to now read it. And then you all have a conversation about it. Sometimes that's easier for the person who may not be as communicative. All right. And so there are so so many ways that we can communicate with our spouse. There's so many things that we can do with our spouse to learn each other and to become vulnerable in that state. And so vulnerability, like I said, is something that really takes you through a process of growth, right? Being willing to trust that person, being willing to release yourself to that person, being willing to say, you know what, I'm going to open my heart, open myself, give of myself to this particular person. When you're talking about a love relationship, it's a covenant, right? So when you're talking about a covenant, remember that a covenant is an agreement between two people. So anytime that the covenant is broken, it means that the agreement is no longer there. It means that somebody wants to opt out. Somebody wants to leave. Why? Because of these things have broken down. Communication is broken down. Trust has been broken down. Vulnerability is no longer there. You can't be vulnerable to that person, and communication is no longer there. So you have to understand these are ways and avenues that we can transition our life, transition ourselves to get in a position to be able to fulfill a healthy relationship. And so a lot of people really want wonderful relationships. We want beautiful relationships. We want to be connected. We want to have this wonderful, I think I saw on the Relationship Corner the other day on social media, someone said, we want to have this wonderful wedding, but we don't realize about what it takes to have the marriage. And so that's true. I think a lot of people have a fantasy or a fairy tale of what it takes to really maintain a love relationship, what it takes to really maintain and to get in the proper alignment and positioning to be able to endure for a process of time into covenant. So again, what I said, covenant is an agreement between two parties. So that means that you have to now come in alignment to say, because I made this particular vow, I'm agreeing to fulfill that vow, right? I'm agreeing to say that I'm going to walk through storms. I'm going to walk through life. I'm going to learn how to communicate. I'm going to learn how to trust you. I'm going to learn how to be vulnerable. I'm going to learn how to open my heart and give of myself. I'm going to learn to grow with you through the phases of life, right? Because how many know that you are not the same person that you are when you marry? So if you marry at 25, how many know 30 years later, you're not going to be the same person that you were? So that means that person, when they say that they come into covenant with you, in an agreement with you, it is about them advancing. It's about them growing. It's about their life changing. And you're willing to go through the changes of life with that person to grow and mature together for a better relationship. So your relationship will have moments where it's bad. Your relationship will have moments where it's sorrowful or maybe even grieving, griefful. But guess what? You got to understand that even in the midst of those moments, that's why communication, trust, and vulnerability are important. You have to be able to share the truth about what you feel. The truth to say, these are things that we need to be trying to do. The truth about these are things that have to be done in order for this to happen. And if you don't literally put those things in place through communication, how can they effectively know or even try to alter or make the changes to make the relationship better? All right. And so I want to take this last few minutes of this lesson on today, and I want to talk about one big word that I'm sure everybody is going to know. Wow, this is one that really I have to deal with. All right. And I want to talk about compromise. Okay, I want to talk about compromise because in any relationship, you are going to have to compromise. You're going to have to be able to say, you know what, I can't always have it my way. All right. And so that may not be easy for some of you, right? That may be hard because guess what? If you are used to being single, right? And then you finally get with somebody and you get in a relationship and then you get married and you may be independent and you may have your own, house, your own car, your own thing. You can come and go as you please. You do what you want to do. Now, all of a sudden, here comes this relationship, this love relationship, and you want to take it to the next level, or you're already married, but you have not learned how to compromise. How many know it's going to take compromise? It's going to take a place of surrender. Wow. In relationships, you got to understand there must be a place of compromise and surrender. You have to take that moment to say, you know what? Oh my goodness, I want to do it this way, but I'm going to give in this time, and I'm going to allow it to be your way. way. You're going to have to be able to see how to do things in more than one way. And that may not be easy for those of you that are strong-willed, or if you have a dominant personality, then it's not easy to compromise. It's not easy to yield. It's not easy to say, okay, I'm going to, allow you to get, the 3 bedrooms and I want the 4 bedrooms. I'm going to allow you to get the Mercedes, but I really want the truck. And so you got to think about, all of these things that happen in relationships, decisions. And because relationships are based on decisions, then guess what? You have to understand and know that you're going to have to compromise along the way to get to the expected end, right? And so you're going to expect
you just want to delete a occurrence of a webinar or an upcoming meeting that you have without affecting all of them. Now, how you do this is you go to your normal area. Okay, now
with that person. And so in order for that to happen, you're going to have to compromise. Find out places that really, it doesn't matter if they don't do this or if they're doing this. And you got to be able to get over those things. Compromise. Know that, maybe they fold the towel to the right and I like it fold to the left. And so, compromise. Maybe they like something higher up and I want it lower. Compromise. Learn how to be able to be willing to say, it doesn't always have to be my way. And so you want to be able to bring a balance in the relationship. And so you want to be able to be selfless, right? Be able to not be selfish. And that's not easy, especially for someone who may be in a relationship at a later stage in age, someone who may have gotten married or got connected into a serious relationship while they're grown. It's not easy. Why? Because you're setting your patterns, you're setting your ways, and now someone is coming in to say that you're going to be in a relationship with them for life. You're going to be married. You're going to be in love with this person. But guess what? You have to learn how to yield, right? And so when I'm compromising, I'm yielding sometimes my wants. I have to yield sometimes my expectations to wait for that person. And so I serve, or we serve one another through compromise, all right? One of the biggest things that you can do in relationships is serve each other through compromise. So learn what's best, right? Learn when it's better to compromise than to have an argument, right? Learn when it's better to just be quiet than to make it, you know what, if it's not my way, it's the highway. That was something that they would say back in the day. So you have to think about, how do I learn to compromise? How do I learn to be selfless? How do I learn how to transition my mind to see how can we meet in the middle, right? And then sometimes it's not even meeting in the middle, because sometimes literally you're just not going to get your way, right? Sometimes you're just not going to be able to get your way, and you have to be comfortable with that and accept the fact that you're not going to just get your way all the time. And so in that relationship, that's how your relationship grows. And then I want to close with this, because as we're talking about this compromise, I want you to understand that when you compromise, you're making an investment. When you compromise, you're making an investment in your relationship, right? And I'm not talking about compromise to the point of abuse. I'm not talking about compromise where, there's no return. I'm talking about compromising to the point that you're making an investment, and down the line, if you compromise in certain areas, how many know that it's going to come back to you? And that same thing that maybe you compromise, then they're going to compromise in another area, and it's going to bring joy to you. And so you have to understand that when you make investments in your relationship, you make investments in commitment, you make investments in being vulnerable, you make investments in being trustworthy, you make investments, right, to be able to compromise. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to reap a return. You're going to reap a harvest. You're going to begin to see your relationship be balanced. You're going to see your relationship have beauty. You're going to see other people want to emulate what you have. Why? Because you have walked through the stages, and you now understand how to be in the proper positioning and alignment for the fulfillment to come to pass. And so I'm so excited to be able to come to you talking about relationships. Again, some people want to talk about it and may not have all the experience, but I'm here to tell you that I've walked in it, I've been in it, amen, and I understand, like I said, from every aspect, from the highs, the lows. We're going to be talking about all of these different things. We talked about some etiquette things on the last couple classes, but I just felt led that we need to talk about relationships. So we're going to be talking about some different aspects of relationships, love versus versus lust. We're going to talk about some different areas that need to be spoken about and dealt with to help you be empowered, right? To help you grow, to help you develop, right? We're going to talk about progression. We're going to talk about advancing in our relationship. We're going to talk about learning how to love a difficult spouse. All right, learning how to love a difficult spouse. If your spouse, amen, has had different abusive situations or things that have happened in their lives, right? How to love that difficult spouse. What's going to happen? How you need to nurture them. What you need to walk through them with. Being able to be patient with that person, right? Understanding that some people have gone through terrible things, right? Doesn't make them a terrible person, but you're going to need to endure through some things and love them through it, right? Because how many know that love endures all, love bears all, and then the Bible said that love suffers long, right? So you have to go through and endure some things to have a wonderful, wonderful relationship. So I just want to say to you today, thank you again for tuning into Deborah's Voice. I pray that you guys were blessed by it, and we're continuing to bring to you some awesome, awesome topics, and I know that you're going to continue to be favored and highly blessed, and you're going to enjoy the rest of your day as you go forth. All right. Again, this is your host, Dr. Dewan Jackson. Have a blessed and an awesome, awesome day. Please feel free to share this